on all of them, and we'll give you an update. With me in studio is Honorable Daniel Manduku, Member of Parliament for Nyaribari Masaba, and Franklin Mukwanja, Executive Director, CMD. We're still waiting for Mule Musau, the National Coordinator, ELOG, and Eric Ukeo, Governance and Security Expert. As soon as they come in, we'll rope them into this discussion. But Manduku, I'll start with you. How significant is this by-election? I see on the dailies here, it's been billed as Moment of Truth, 2027 dress rehearsal. How significant is the outcome of this by-election?
Thank you, Trevor, and good morning, viewers. I'm always happy to come to your studio when called upon. Trevor, from where I sit, and with all honesty, these by-elections are not significant in as far as the 2027 race is concerned. To me, these by-elections have two dimensions. The first dimension, and we were discussing with my friend here, is to test the credibility and the ability of the newly reconstituted Independent Electoral Commission on its ability to hold fair and transparent elections. The second dimension that these by-elections hold, and I think people may take me wrongly, but the only person sleeping pretty is Dr. William Ruto, because these by-elections will now give him a reason to create a new team. In fact, I think wherever William Ruto is ready to lose the by-election, so that he can now call his people and tell them, Musalia Mudavadi, I gave you 2 talents. The biblical story of talents. What did you do with the talents? He can also call his deputy and ask him, Professor, wewe ni professor, mbona hukuleta hii kiti? So it is a moment for William Ruto to recreate his team. But in as far as 2027 is concerned, and we say in politics a day in politics a long time, they have no significance whatsoever, from where I sit.
Why is that? Because if, for example, if a government candidate loses, isn't that significant for 2027 that I show the people's defiance?
William Ruto will have a reason now to create a new team. You see, for example, he has no reason today.
Loses, isn't that a vote of no confidence in the government led by President William
Ruto? Normally in any system, midterm elections are normally what you call a gauge. But for an incumbent president like William Ruto, it will give him a reason to have a new team. And you can say, you know, you never delivered this, so get out. What these elections will give is what I would call, quote unquote, new regional kingpins. There are 3 by-elections in Kisii, for example. If, and we pray they go Matiang'i way, he will deal with Matiang'i and get rid of these other characters. If in the western region, Malava is lost, he will deal with Natembeya and tell Musalia Mudavadi, I have no reason to deal with you. This is, you know, I come from a system where we believe in performance measures. This is a test for those people who are given money and resources to go and campaign. And come Monday, William Ruto will look at the numbers and tell you, you lost in Malava, you lost in Magarini, I have no business dealing with you. Perfect reason for him to recreate a new team. And he has all the reasons and right to do that. Okay. That's how I look at it, from where I sit.
All right.
You know, there's what we call the 48 laws of power. If you realize, William Ruto has not gone to any of these areas to campaign. He has taken the 48th law, formlessness. He tells you, Trevor, go and campaign. What do you want? Here. Mudavadi, what do you want? Here. And that's why these characters are all in the field. You know, you can see the way they are struggling. So you'll come and tell them, you never delivered. I have no business with you. And now have a reason
to form new
alliances. And that is how politics works. Okay. You know?
Okay. Interesting analogy. Mukwanja, what do you think? How significant are these by-elections?
Interesting, that was our first discussion, the moment we met and said hi to each other. And I tend to agree with the Honourable Member of Parliament that the dynamics in a by-election tend to be starkly different from our general elections. Just to mention a few, is that in a general elections, the wave tends to be quite strong. Unlike in by-elections, where the ground game in terms of mobilization is key, because the voter turnout is not as high, according to the data that we have, in by-elections as compared to general elections. So the other thing is that the formations at such a time they're not very defined, like when you have ready teams with their presidential candidates in a general election. And therefore, the reliance and over-reliance on networks other than your own profile as a candidate and your outreach to voters and your get-out-the-vote strategies makes a difference. But also the investors in this are quite different, with different dynamics. And therefore, that distance to the general election gives the very critical actors and investors some time to sit back and watch. And I agree with the Honorable Manduku that it would actually be a continuous assessment test, so to put it, for the many second-tier politicians who are looking to be part of a presidential candidate team. And we do not have a clear one on the opposition side. The only clear candidate we have now is William Ruto, and his keeping off is actually a key indicator that he's using it as a continuous assessment test to see who are the likely allies that he can reinvent the team with, especially knowing very well that he's an incumbent can tend to be quite popular. But the major dynamics for me, again, I agree with Honorable Manduku, is that the major exam, other than William Ruto offering a continuous assessment team, assessment test to a number of leaders to form his team, the real exam is with IEBC. And it is a serious credibility validation that is ongoing. If they can pull off this and the people feel that the process has been conducted in a good way, then we are on a right footing, and everyone prays so. Because any election in our history so far that has involved an incumbent has been very difficult, and where you have trust deficit in the election management body, in the IEBC, then you just compound the challenges that we have. One prays that a patriot would pray that actually the new commission under the chairpersonship of Ethekon delivers that and reassures Kenyans that we are up to task. The other test is actually to the other electoral management bodies. And we have to begin to look into the role of the security apparatus. Is the action of cordoning off Mbeere North, for instance, based on any viable and truthful intelligence that actually there could be external influences that are unnecessary in the election? Is the withdrawal of security. Where I come from, there's a saying, in the olden days, Trevor, people didn't have pit latrines. And therefore, the bushes were largely the places to relieve yourself. And therefore, there's a saying in my mother tongue that those who relieved themselves in the bush tend to forget, but the ones who happen to step in never forget. And there seems not to be lessons learned by the likes of Murkomen and the others, that they were on the receiving end in the past regime, crying foul about these things. And now they are doing the same tactics. How is the withdrawal of security to those who are deserved and their real right to security, and like every Kenyan, playing out. And what is the role of the security apparatus in this, I dare say, nonsense that is going on? We have seen in Malava and some of those faces lending credibility to some of the allegations by some of the candidates. I have seen some of the well-known political hoodlums that hang around politicians in Nairobi, and they have no ancestral ancestral connections to Malaba. I have seen them with their big bellies down there in the village. And these are issues that have been raised. And there was one that was mercilessly, beaten yesterday and confessing to some things. And these are things that we have to our police, again, in cahoots with some of these goons on hire, and how is that going to play out? Because police and security agencies are a very critical electoral management body that we must look into. So these are the real assessments that we have. And of course, again, we are out there as civic actors under the Uchaguzi platform. I am aware that we have really deployed quite a number of observers, and we're looking at various dynamics. We want to see the levels of compliance with the regulations. We want to pick out areas that we can be able to agitate, lobby for the necessary reforms so that we can enable IEBC to really deliver a good election in 2027. We're also interested in the SIGs, particularly how PWDs are being facilitated, how young people are excited about this, whether they're turning out to vote. The register roll of 2022 may not be having the quintessential young person that was on the streets in 2024 and in June this year. But we want to see the demographics as well. To what extent are younger people, not necessarily youth, coming out and voting, so that we can begin to see what then levels of civic engagement, what levels of discussions, how do we reinvent the voter and political education to make sure. Because you want, as a country goes to a very critical election like 2027, to have its largest demographic real participating, to allow for the moral, legal, and political legitimacy of those that will have won, and the magnanimity of those that will also have lost, to say, look, we have participated and we feel that the outcome is credible, is fair, it's transparent. So, Trevor, the electoral management bodies are on trial. That needs to be validated. William Ruto is sitting pretty, offering continuous assessment test. And largely, it is with Wetangula, it is about Musalia, it is about Kindiki, if I may say.
Okay. Eric Oke is now joining us now. He's a governance and security expert. Eric, how significant is this by-election in your view?
Trevor, thank you. The by-elections are a do and die for William Ruto. If he wins them, he begins from a point of it was not as bad. If he loses them, the die is cast. It is rehearsal for 2027. And that is why he is stopping at nothing to deploy police in the reckless manner in which they have been deployed. Because the bravado displayed by police is as if the voters are going to be their enemy targets. From a perspective of security, you don't want to deploy security agents in a manner that suggests potential conflict. On the other hand, I shudder to imagine that if there were to be real conflict between the citizens and police, how it would end. And that is why that just buttresses my point that the by-elections are a must-win regardless of anything for William Ruto. Notwithstanding the fact that the country is at a very delicate state today. You saw that even when IEBC said the campaigns ended, government apologists continued to campaign, continued to appear with GOK branded mattresses and food. And one hopes, I truly hope, that the people of Malava will overcome this temptation. Because for Western Province, for the Luhya Nation, it is a test of the relevance to Ruto by Musalia and the National Assembly Speaker, Moses Wetangula. Because you have seen how Wetangula is openly involved, even in a by-election for an MCA in Kabuchai. Where is the county assembly speaker of Bungoma? If Wetangula must go to Bungoma to express partisan politics in favor of a candidate he supports for a by-election of an MCA position. So that tells you how bad it is. My expectation is that Kenyans will not feel intimidated by the over-deployment and the overzealousness of the security forces and would vote for their candidates. On the other hand, you see someone like Murkomen thinking it is heroic to withdraw bodyguards from political leaders. What happens if, God forbid, something now ominous happens to any of these leaders? Would we still have a country? Would Murkomen still talk?
Okay. Yeah. Fundamental questions they are being raised by Eric. And now joining us now is also Mule Musau, National Coordinator ELOG from the Elections Observation Group. We were talking about how significant this by-election is, but before we get into that, have you received any preliminary reports of how the polling has started as ELOG? Are there any concerns? Is it smooth?
I think so far from what I've received, I've not got to any. I wished I passed through a polling station, but I did not. But my team is on the ground. So far, no incidents at the moment. I'm hoping in the next 1 hour or so to get another update.
Okay. How significant are these by-elections in your view?
Very significant. If you consider that we are about just 1.5 years to the next elections. If you consider the fact that we have a commission which just came into office barely 3 months ago, and the kind of toxic political environment. You know, we've talked about the issue of continuous campaign mode in this country. We can only expect that from 2026 that is going to reach fever pitch. So I think now there's no room for any more sobriety. So for me, this election comes at a time where we have to determine, or at least IBC must reassure Kenyans that is up to the task, number one. And number two, that the political class, it's going to determine exactly the kind of directions. There is a united opposition or not. There's a government which is trying to defend its incumbency. So it's a good testing ground for the political class. But for us, and especially for the citizens, it's an opportunity for IEBC to be able to showcase itself in terms of managing and conducting elections in a transparent, in a credible, in a free and fair manner.
Okay. And Manduku, you know, there's something interesting that Okeyo had said, that this is a must-win. It's a do or die for President William Ruto. You disagreed with that. But the loss, would that reflect a vote of no confidence in Ruto's presidency? Because how then do you punish your lieutenants, the ones you're talking about, when you're the party to blame? You're the head of this institution.
I told you, and I'll repeat again for clarity, that if you look at William Ruto's character, he has largely kept off his by-elections himself. He has not gone to any of the stations or centers to campaign.
He has really restrained himself.
Well, they say he has restrained himself, but it is a political strategy where you blame the loss on your lieutenants. I can tell you the only person who is sleeping pretty here is William Ruto. Because in politics, a year is a long time. This by-election, whether win or loss, will give him, he will now do what we call recalibrate himself. And you see, given that our politics is based on regional, quote-unquote, kingpins, he will put those guys to shame and tell them, I gave you 2 talents. What did you deliver? We have been on this road before, and luckily I am a student of history. In 1994, we had a similar situation where Muskari Kombo had his election nullified by the High Court. In fact, the Court of Appeal, on account of administering witchcraft. And he was barred in contesting in the subsequent by-election. Moses Wetangula, then a young lawyer, the same Musalia Mudavadi. There was Elijah Mwangale, and there was somebody else. I think there were 5 strong Luhya kingpins at that time who Moi sent to campaign in Webuye. The opposition led by Raila Odinga, the late Raila Odinga, and a guy called George Captain, and Masinde Murillo, went and campaigned in Webuye and won that by-election. And when they came back, Moi told them, "Nyinyi, mulikula pesa yangu bure." That is what William Ruto is going to do. He is shedding off, you know, like the proverbial snake. You shed off your skin and you get a rebirth. It's a perfect reason for William Ruto to dump all these guys and create a new team. And you know, 1 year is a long time. He can have a new team and re-strategize and say, okay, you guys, I was dealing with the wrong guys now. Seth Panyako, in fact, if Seth Panyako wins, he'll be the first guy to call him to State House. You'll see. They'll shake a hand in State House. If Magarini, Kombe does not win, the young man who's on DCP,
Kenga,
he'll call him to State House and say, now you're my guys, let's work together. That's how politics works. You must regenerate yourself. And this is a perfect reason or perfect environment for William Ruto to do that. In fact, I know William Ruto wants to lose these elections so that he can get a new team. In Kisii, he'll deal with Matiang'i and tell my friends, my colleagues, that you guys cannot deliver. That is how politics works, because it's about the ultimate numbers. Who has brought the prize bull home? That's how it is.
Okay.
It's not a do or die for him, because we are 2 years away from elections. Don't forget, election formations are formed 3 months, 6 months to the elections. So we still have a whole year plus to make any new teams.
Okay. So if for example, the proxy war between the current deputy president and the former deputy president, that's what Mbeere North has really been deemed to be.
Yes.
So if this goes the way of the former deputy president, will that mean then that William Ruto will be forming alliances with his former deputy and not the...
He may not form an alliance with him directly, but he will have a reason to dump his deputy.
And get somebody...
Get somebody, come to Kisii and get a deputy from there, for example, or go to Lonyas and get a deputy. Here, it is a question of having a reason to dump Kindiki.
Okay.
Yeah.
is that argument valid in your way?
Yeah,
and you had mentioned earlier on that you support him, but people are saying that this by-election will be a vote of no confidence if it goes the opposite direction to the presidency itself, not to the people who are down there.
You know, first, even just in terms of the science of sampling, you cannot make such a drastic decision about, you know, elections in 22 locations. You know, that's about 5 constituencies and 1 county. And you see, the president is keen to safeguard his outlook going into 2027. He already knows that he's limping out of the challenges that he's had in his first 3 years in office, and it can tell you that he's tried to do it in the way that Honorable Manduku is saying. One is keep off the campaigns per se himself. He's really knowing the president, a dyed-in-wool politician. He's really helped himself, and I think he's having a lot of pains on how he's missed the opportunity to be on the campaign trail. But that was the only way to keep his head above the waters, in my view. Number 2, look at the games that were played in Baringo. You know, he could not afford to have a strong candidate that had a public push like Gideon Moi, you know, going against UDA. He knew that level of competition would actually expose him, not just in terms of whether Gideon Moi would win Baringo, but in terms of how many votes he would actually gather. If there would be an improvement from his 2022 performance and give the president and his party a run for his money, then that would be sending a very strong signal. And he went out of his way to remove Gideon Moi from the ballot paper. There have been stories about whether he should join cabinet or whether he's refused and wants his proxy or whether he's been shortchanged. But I think that was a clean game that William Ruto afforded. Look at the Tembelio and the other ward again in his
zone strongholds,
pushing for, you know, unopposed. They have made that attempts again in Narok. That tells you that there's a level of ruthless pragmatism in President William Ruto about these by-elections. There's a level of strategy to it, but there's also a level of scare that he has and wants to ring-fence his level of profile to a particular level. But looking at the dynamics in a general election and the dynamics in a by-election, this is an exam for IEBC and electoral management bodies, including us civic actors. What are we going to observe, and what recommendations are we going to make, and what level of validation does IEBC get in terms of its credibility on how it actually stands the ground, delivers a free, fair, credible process that arrives at legitimate outcomes that people can say, voila, this is what we expected of you. And other actors like ourselves who have deployed observers saying this is what we observed and these are the necessary reform areas. Or civic educators saying the voter turnout around SIGs, the process is not facilitative, we need to invest more in young people to come out and vote. And also looking into the actions of the other electoral management bodies other than IEBC. 2027 is a distant. There is no clear formation, all right? And this by-election, the only significance bearing that we'll have on 2027 is the realignments that will happen in the aftermath of the by-election results, especially in the absence of Baba. You could not say that Kasipul would be facing such competition. You can see clearly that Maganga is now out, out of the cloud cover of his governor and has gone with the independent candidate. And other voices are coming out, right? Savula has also broken ranks with his party and switched. So there are also games that are being played there. So the only effect that this by-election has is on the electoral management bodies and other stakeholders that are keen on the credibility of IEBC, on the public trust in the electoral political system. On the other political side, it's about realignment. It's about sizing each other. It's just about bulls who don't want to entangle, but just, scratching the ground and bearing each other now. No bearing to 2027 other than realignments that will portend after the election.
I'll come to you for that because you mentioned that this is it's a do or die.
Correct.
Let's cross over to Stephen Leto, who's standing by Baringo, and touch base on what's going on there. Leto, good morning. It's good to see you. What's the latest from where you are? Voting started because this was open at 6, actually. It's almost an hour now into it.
Yes, indeed, Trevor, good morning. This has been termed as a dress rehearsal by-election, and we are in Baringo. Right now, we are in Visa Oshwal Primary School polling station, and Trevor, the turnout is extremely low because until now, since the polls began at 6 o'clock, we've had less than 10 people cast their vote in the senatorial by-election in this particular polling station. Of course, we'll be going across to look at what exactly is happening in other polling stations, but the indication so far is a low turnout of voters in this by-election in Baringo. There are about 281,053 registered voters that are expected to take part in this particular senatorial by-election that was left vacant by the passing on of the late Senator William Cheptumo. The polling stations across the 6 constituencies opened on time, according to what we've been able to gather, and the poll officers have been able to, we've seen them, working closely with the security agencies as well as election observers that are here. Commissioner Ann Deritu from the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission is representing the commission in this particular senatorial by-election, and so there are a lot that we expect to go and find out right from Baringo South, Tiati, Baringo North, Baringo Central, where we are, as well as Eldama Ravine and Mogoti. And so, Trevor, we continue to keep track, but so far there is a very low turnout, probably an indication that it is still a working day today, being a Thursday, but all the same, the many factors could also be more voters could be turning up as the hours proceed, or during lunch hour, or even as the polls head to a close at 5 o'clock in the evening. And so, Trevor, we will not really conclude about the percentage of turnout right now, but we will be able to see how many people will have turned up by the close of the polls this evening. Trevor.
How is the security deployment where you are? Have you seen an increased number of security officers? How is it looking?
The security is very paramount for this particular by-election, especially for the far-flanked areas and polling stations. Remember, the other time we reported of 8 submerged polling stations along Lake Bogoria and Lake Baringo. But remember, there is also another security need for all the election materials to get to the destinations. We've been tracking the deployment since yesterday, but we've not been able to see any peculiar cases with regard to the insecurity. But the security deployment has been very firm, particularly the far-flanked polling stations, particularly in areas of Tiati, Baringo North, and even Baringo South. Those are the places that the county commissioner yesterday confirmed heavy deployment to ensure that the voting exercise runs smoothly, and voting materials and all polls materials are also delivered to the polling stations and back to the county tallying center without any incidences reported. The also security of poll officials as well as poll observers and even the media has also been guaranteed by the county commissioner, who spoke to us yesterday about the deployment that has been made around this particular by-election. It's a neck-to-neck and a turnout by-election, so to speak, right here in Baringo. So we continue to track, particularly on the security of the election, the by-election itself, as well as the turnout of the voters in Baringo senatorial by-election. Trevor.
Leto, you mentioned the submerged polling stations. I remember you mentioned that yesterday as well. So they were supposed to gazette new polling stations. Did that happen, and are the people aware? The people were meant to cast their ballots in the submerged stations?
This particular gazettement of the submerged polling stations was done not on
We're having a bit of a technical challenge with Stephen Leto. They will get back to him so that to speak about the 2 polling stations that were submerged and the alternative that was given by the IEBC. We'll cross over to Leto and get that in just a short while. But let's take a very quick break here. When we come back, we'll still continue with our coverage, end-to-end coverage of the by-election happening in 18 counties, 22 electoral areas. There's supposed to be 24 electoral areas, but then Uasin Gishu, Tembelio Ward, and Elgeyo Marakwet Metkei Ward, there was declared no contest. That's why we're saying in 22 areas. Senate is 1, member of National Assembly 6, MCAs are 15. They're supposed to be 17, but there are 2 that will be declared no contest. This is happening across 18 counties, and we have all our reporters in across all of them. We'll give you an update of where we are. Emmanuel Toh is in Bere North, Melita Letenges is in Malava, Laura Otieno is in Ugunja, Stephen Leto is in Baringo, Gatete Njoroge is in Kasipul, Francis Talaki is in Magarini, and everywhere else where this is happening. What has been deemed by the dailies as a moment of truth and a 2027 dress rehearsal. See you in just a bit.